What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Rise Up Rich podcast. I'm your host, David Haas. I'm here alone today talking about the power of thought. We hear a lot about how your thoughts create your reality and how important it is for us to have positive thinking. And I was on this positive thinking kick for a long time. I did believe that the power of my thoughts would dictate the reality that I was creating, would dictate my future. But there's a lot more to it than just positive thinking. You have to go deeper to understand where these negative thoughts are coming from. By trying to change your thoughts by just interjecting a few positive thoughts throughout the day, you're really fighting a losing battle because we have 70,000 subconscious thoughts every single day. So when you just take a few moments and try and think positively, you're just fighting a losing battle. You're up against 70,000 subconscious thoughts. So with that awareness, then it would make more sense to understand why you're having negative thoughts in the first place, and learning how to transcend those negative thoughts by getting to the root of where they started. Seems simple enough, but it is a little bit more of a process. I think the first step here is to understand that emotions create thoughts. So when we're trying to change our thoughts, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to understand what emotion these thoughts are tied to. And when we can understand that, then we can begin to heal from the emotion that is creating all of these negative thoughts. And once we heal from that emotion, the thoughts just go away. Then once the thoughts are gone from this maybe one negative incident that happened in our lives, we can then start bringing in positive thinking. But if you try and kind of put a Band-Aid of positive thinking over top of a bunch of negative thoughts that are happening because of an original incident, it's like a wound that's just never going to close. So the thing I think that's probably first and foremost that is important to understand how to stop negative thinking is to bring awareness to what the negative thoughts are. So there's a couple ways you can do this, but the real simplest way that I seem to have the most success with is just observing my thoughts. So I take a few moments throughout the day and I just listen to what my mind is saying. I'm not trying to control my thoughts. I'm not trying to slow them down. I'm not trying to do anything along those lines. I'm just taking a step back. It's called moving into observer mode and just listening to what the mind is saying. And when you start to pay attention to what the mind is saying, you're going to start to realize, first and foremost, that pretty much 80% of the thoughts that you have are completely useless. But then you can start to observe the patterns that you're having. And if the patterns are constantly in the past, constantly thinking of guilt, regret, things that you should have been doing, things that you could have been doing better, then you can start to realize, okay, well, a lot of my thoughts are in the past, and let me just go back and deal with these past incidences. Hopefully that will create the elimination of all of these thoughts you're having throughout the day. If your thoughts are constantly going to the future, then we can start bringing more awareness to the present moment and trying to understand why we're projecting so much into the future. So let's look at past first. So the mind will only exist, the ego will only exist in the past or in the future. So when we start to observe our thoughts, we'll come to the realization that most of our thoughts are either in the past or in the future. So right now we're going to talk about what to do if your mind is mainly stuck in the past. Okay, so if your mind's mainly stuck in the past, you're probably experiencing emotions like guilt and regret about how you could have done things better. This is usually when you're unsure of yourself, you have self-doubt, you have a conversation with someone, and then you spend the rest of your day replaying that conversation in your head, trying to think of ways you could have reacted better or ways you could have made the situation better. So if you're constantly finding yourself in this place of looking back and trying to replay, it's probably connected to self-doubt. So then we ask ourselves, well, where did self-doubt begin in our lives? And what we want to do is create awareness around the top 5 or 6 original incidences, which I've heard called OIs. So we call original incidences OIs. So what were the 5 or 6 OIs in your life that really shaped who you were? And just bring awareness to those. So once you bring awareness to what those OIs are, then you can begin to understand what emotions are tied to those OIs. So I've given you guys this example a million times. If you listen to the podcast, you're probably getting sick of it. I'll have to come up with some new examples. But the one of my OIs was the shame that I experienced from, driving crappy cars, living in a not so beautiful house, and being embarrassed about the way that the cars that I drove and the way that I lived. So that was one of my OIs, is that shame that I experienced. So that OI created this belief that I needed to make money in order to escape feeling that feeling ever again. I needed to live in a nice house, drive nice cars, have lots of money. And that basically shaped everything that I was. It shaped who I was. It didn't force me into, but it led me down the path of becoming an entrepreneur. And all of it was around this idea that I didn't want to experience shame anymore. So by bringing awareness to this OI, I could then allow myself to become free of that shame. So how do you become free of the shame? Well, I've done podcasts on the letting go technique, but essentially the way you become free of emotions is you just feel them. The resistance to feeling emotions is what keeps emotions going. So if you just finally allow yourself to connect to the feeling fully, you'll then become free of it. So you can do this by actually just closing your eyes and bringing yourself back to the moment and feeling the feeling and not allowing the mind to run away from it. You could journal about it. You can get a therapist. You can get a coach. You can talk about it. There's a bunch of ways to let it go. But once you finally let go of that emotion, then you let go of all the thoughts that are associated with this. So for me, once I dealt with the shame and was free of it, all of the thoughts about how to make more money and projecting into the future and doing all these things, they all kind of went away because I had dealt with the shame and I was no longer scared of it. I was no longer frightened of feeling the feeling of shame. So all the thoughts that went through my head for years and years and years, I probably had millions of thoughts about how to make more money. And it was all based around this idea that I didn't want to experience this shame anymore. So you can see the power of understanding what your OIs are and then what emotions are connected to those OIs. When you free yourself of the emotion, you then free yourself of the thoughts. So this clears the path for you then to start putting in positive thoughts. Okay, so you can't put the positive thoughts in until you kind of clear the room, I guess, you clear the room for the positive thoughts by removing the negative thoughts. If you constantly find yourself projecting in the future, I guess I kind of already had given that example, because this OI for me was it did end up making me project to the future. I actually had completely repressed that incident in my life, meaning I had forgotten about it, but it was still shaping everything that I had become. It was shaping who I was. So learning how to understand what it was that caused this then allowed me to stop projecting into the future, because the reason I was projecting into the future was to not feel that shame anymore. So I guess everything really is about the connection to the OIs, the connection to the emotion of those OIs, and these are where your thoughts begin. So the two ways to understand this is, one, to move into this observer mode. Now I do this in my car. I just turn the radio off and I just observe my thoughts. I just start paying attention to what is going through my mind. This will then give me some insights onto where I should look for these OIs and find the emotions. The second thing, though, that will really help you is to begin meditating. And what you're going to do in this meditation is you're going to try and connect to the present moment as much as possible. The ego, or the mind, whatever you want to call it, can only exist, like I said, in the past and the future. So if we start to learn how to connect to the present moment, we'll find that our thoughts will begin to kind of melt away a little bit. They'll kind of fade away, because the thoughts that we normally have on a day-to-day basis, those 70,000 subconscious thoughts that we normally have, they can't exist in the past or in the future. So learning how to connect to the present moment through meditation will then begin to take back control over those thoughts. So what I do in my meditations is I'm just connecting to a constant noise or my breath, and I focus all of my awareness on that constant noise or on my breath. every time my mind begins to go to the past or the future, I just become aware of the thought that I'm having, and then I bring myself back to that present moment. I do this every morning for about 10 minutes. And what it does, it just slows down the mind, allows me to connect to this present moment. And just doing that practice on a daily basis begins to, I guess, it slows my thoughts throughout the day. I'm just more conscious of the thoughts that I'm having throughout the day. If we are not conscious of our thoughts, then our thoughts are essentially controlling us. If we go through our entire day where we never actually take a moment to observe what's going through our head, then our thoughts or our ego is what is in control. And we don't want that. We want our higher self, our true self, our soul, our essence. We want that to be what's in control and driving our decisions. So let me circle back here. So for example, my ego had created this sense of purpose in me that I was supposed to become an entrepreneur. I was supposed to make all kinds of money, but that was the ego's sense of purpose that was created in order for me to not feel the shame that I felt as a kid. Once I was able to remove that shame, I then could get aligned with what my true purpose was, which was to give back and help others. Okay. And this is giving back and helping others is really at the core of all of our true purpose. It's just a matter about how you want to frame it. Not all of you need to become a coach and release a podcast and do all these things to give back. You can give back in a million different ways. You can give back by owning a restaurant and delivering, amazing meals like to your customers, or providing employment. It doesn't have to be in the setting of giving back the way I'm giving back, but at the core of who we truly are is about giving back to other people. It's just how you want to give back. But my ego had created this idea that my sense of purpose was to make millions of dollars. And now when I look back, I'm like, oh, well, that was kind of a silly sense of purpose. But that was what I thought I was supposed to do. But it wasn't until I was able to observe my thoughts and become clear that those thoughts were only coming from a survival pattern that was created by the ego, and it wasn't my true purpose. So I had to wash all that away to get connected with my true purpose. The reason that this happened was because I was completely unaware of my thoughts. Up until probably about 30 years old, I was probably completely unaware of my thoughts. I was just allowing my thoughts to drive the bus. And once I started to learn how to take this step back and start observing the thoughts, then I started taking back control over the mind. Okay. So this is why it's really important to start practicing this observation. And then, after you listen to this podcast, if you're in your car, just shut your radio off and just sit in silence and just listen to what the mind has to say. And the second thing that will happen when you do this is once you kind of shine the light of awareness on your thoughts, you automatically begin taking back your power. It's kind of like, I always give this example of like, there's two bad examples, but like if you shine a light in a dark room and there's bugs, the bugs kind of scatter. So it's like, or if you're dancing on a dance floor and you're completely letting loose, and then all of a sudden you realize that people are looking at you, you kind of stop, right? So the same thing is happening with our thoughts. Once we kind of take that step back and we start observing them, then it changes our thoughts. Just the observation of our thoughts begins to change them and begins to slow down the rate at which we're having them. So then we can begin to start to understand where those thoughts came from. So getting into this observer mode is really going to allow you to understand what is your thoughts are, where they were created, but it's also just the process of observing these thoughts is going to start taking back your power over them. Okay, so we want to get our higher selves in the driver's seat. I'm going to say it again, but probably the first time that our higher selves was in the driver's seat was when we were a kid, before we started taking on all these programs and all these belief systems. When you're a kid, you're just carefree. You do whatever. You don't care what people are thinking of you. Slowly, over time, people start to judge you. People tell you you're doing things wrong. Don't do things like that. Yes, no. You get punished. You get rewarded, and then all of a sudden, we get so far away from who we truly are. And the goal of spiritual growth is to get ourselves realigned with our higher selves and to eliminate the ego that only exists in the past and the future. So once I was able to do that by this process of observation, I was able to get aligned with what it was that I truly did. So I guess I'll wrap this up with this portion of this with bring awareness to what your OIs are. That would be step one. What are your original incidences? What are the 5, 6, maybe there's more major things that happened to you that really shaped your life, and how did you feel when those things happened? Okay, so for me, with the car and being the smelly kid in school and all these things, it was shame, right? So I had to allow myself to feel that shame, right? Once I allowed myself to feel the shame, all the thoughts that were associated with that one incident probably created millions of thoughts in my life. So once I was able to feel that shame, those millions of thoughts were then gone. Okay, so this is how we begin to install positive thinking habits. The second thing is observe your thoughts. Just by observing, you're going to change them. So either in your car, turn the radio off, in the shower, you're just observing, right? The third thing is to begin to meditate. And I mean, obviously this seems like a very simple solution to stop overthinking, but it is that simple. And, I have this saying that success is simple. It's just a matter of doing small, daily, consistent tasks, right? So if you're having trouble with overthinking and negative thinking, it's like, well, you find 10 minutes in the day to begin to meditate and connect to the present moment. So all you're doing is connecting to a constant noise or to your breath, and you're trying to sit there and stay with the present moment as much as possible. I have a YouTube video called Meditation Made Easy, and it's really simple. I really lay it out really simply in like a 3-minute video on how to meditate. Okay, so when you connect to the present moment, this is when the unknown is revealed to you also. So then you can then get out of your own way of all of these crazy thoughts that you have, and you can then begin to connect to anything that's outside the circle of what you know, which becomes insanely powerful to get creative, to think outside the box, and when we learn how to do this. So yeah, I think that's basically it. I think the big takeaway from this podcast, and I want to make this simple, and I don't want to just beat this to death, is that if you're not observing your thoughts are driving the bus. They're behind the wheel. So if you get anything from this podcast, it's to begin to become aware of what it is that's actually going through your head. So let me give you one more example. I'm currently releasing, I have like an ad going on Facebook and Instagram right now for like a free coaching call. If you want to get that free coaching call, you can just head to my website, davidhaas.ca. And so I've spent a lot of time creating this web landing page, creating the video, making all of these ads, and then I hit play, and the ads just aren't working, right? So without being aware of my thoughts, I could see how this could just send me completely spiraling and completely deflate any energy that I had towards, becoming a successful coach, because you put all this energy and effort, this could essentially be like a 2 or 3 month process that I've kind of gotten to this point where like, this is how I want to expand my coaching business, is using this free coaching call method. And then you hit play, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. If you're not aware of what your mind is telling you, that mind can very, very quickly completely debilitate any of your forward progress. Okay. So, I caught my mind several times going like, this is stupid. It's not working. Maybe I should just go back to running a restaurant, which seems to be what I'm really good at. And all these negative thoughts that begin to come through, in the self-doubt, which is kind of my collapse. Like I've talked about your favorite collapse before. My favorite collapse is self-doubt, where I start to like question whether what I'm doing is right, and is this the proper course of action? Is there a better way to do it? These are the things that start going through my mind. And if I didn't have the ability, because I've trained myself to have the ability to start observing these thoughts, it could very easily send me into a place of like just being stuck. And this is probably where people are getting stuck, actually. That could be a whole entire another podcast, is you're getting stuck because your mind is getting you stuck, right? These constant thoughts of, I'm not good enough, this isn't working, I'm never going to become successful, whatever the thoughts are. But these thoughts are debilitating. They drain your energy, they suck your life force, and it starts to affect every aspect of your life. Now you have less energy to go to the gym. You're not as not as good of a husband or spouse because you're miserable that you're not performing the way you should be in business or in life. You're more stressed out. Like it just goes on and on and on. So all of this is what is happening to people that feel like they get stuck because they're just not paying attention to what they're telling themselves. So if you learn how to get into this observer mode, then you can start to say, okay, wait a second, what's going on here? Oh, this is my self-doubt, right? And then just for me, just by catching myself in this, I'm like, oh, this is my self-doubt. And then what I basically, because I've worked through this, is like, well, no, if this doesn't work, I just morph, I just change, and I just try something new. I don't allow self-doubt to stop me in my tracks and maybe make me do nothing for the next 3 months. It's like so simple for that to happen. But because I was aware, I would be like, okay, I'm aware. I'm going into my collapse of self-doubt. I know this has happened before. Let's just continue to push forward. This is the difference between the ego being in the driver's seat and the higher self being in the driver's seat. And this is what we want to connect to through the power of observation. So I hope that podcast served you. I know I kind of rambled on a little bit there, but thoughts are powerful. Positive thinking works, but you have to remove the negative emotion that all of these negative thoughts are associated with first. And you do this by first observing, creating awareness around your original incidences, healing from the emotion in those original incidences, and then you can begin to start installing new habits, new programs, new behaviors that you take on consciously. And this is what will allow you, your higher self, to be in the driver's seat so you can overcome overthinking, you can overcome analysis paralysis, and you can continue to move forward and maximize your potential. So hope you like that podcast. If you haven't already, just make sure you click subscribe, and I'll see you again next Wednesday.